Husband tries to warn neighbors about their landscaping, gets told to mind his own business, by user Nabru Sunshine. Some background: my husband is pretty handy. Prior to COVID, he had done several flip houses as a fun side gig. It's what he loves to do, and he became very familiar with a ton of city codes. During COVID, seems everyone was suddenly buying houses to flip out of boredom and prices skyrocketed, so he put that on hold. So then he started doing household repairs and upgrades, building fences, etc. around the neighborhood as well. To get a better understanding of the neighborhood HOA bylaws and whatnot, he joined the HOA Architectural Committee. Through that he learned all there was to know about what was allowed and what was not, how the process worked, how to work around things, etc. Long story short, my husband was very knowledgeable in what to do and not do, and various processes with the neighborhood and the city. Our next door neighbor decided they were going to start landscaping their backyard, and they I guess planned to make theirs as similar to our backyard as possible. Problem was, despite being next door neighbors, our land was quite different. For one thing, behind our house was a bunch of brush and pine trees, maybe 3-4 from the lake that's at the back of the house. We didn't have to do a whole lot to clear the area, but the brush on their property was about 1/3 of their yard, I'd say 10 from the water. Also, the way the houses on our street are, the land naturally made like a valley, where the house to our right is at the top, we're in the middle, and the next two houses are at the bottom before it very quickly rises again. First thing the neighbors did was cut down all the trees in their backyard. They were not small trees either, but 4-story tall trees or more. Husband and neighbor were talking about the backyard plans when my husband casually mentioned he was surprised the city gave him permission to cut down so many trees. In our city, you had to have an arborist give permission to cut down any trees that were X foot tall. Neighbor first said it wasn't the city's business what he did with his backyard, then told my husband to mind his own business. Okay. Fair enough. Then they started putting up the retaining wall to bring it up to level with our property, which would have been about 7-8 tall. Basically they were just stacking a bunch of cinder blocks. My husband uneasily asked if their landscapers had ever done a retaining wall like that, and if the city approved it. City says that if a retaining wall is over 5 tall you need a structural engineer to come out. Neighbor said again it wasn't any of the city's business what he did to his yard, and for my husband to mind his own business. While they're filling up the backyard to bring theirs level to ours, the landscapers are dumping all the dirt, gravel, and sand in the street, blocking a little over half the road. Several of the neighbors who had trucks would just hop the curb, but other neighbors with smaller cars were mad. Before my husband could ask if they could put the dirt and stuff in their driveway instead of the road, like everyone else, neighbor went off on my husband to fuck right off. Well, okay then. My husband let them continue working, and didn't say a word as they started constructing a 10-tall fence, which was against HOA regulations. Fences couldn't be taller than 6. Between them starting construction 6 days a week before 7 a.m. and them blocking the road, I guess someone had had enough. Next thing I know city officials are out there putting a big ass sign in the yard saying all construction was to be halted until further notice. It wasn't us, but my husband found out through the architectural committee that someone had complained about the noise and the road blockage to the HOA, who came out to investigate, saw everything they had done, and then reported them to the city. They got a hefty fine for every tree stump the city official found. The structural engineer said their retaining wall was not sound and had to be redone, and it had to have regular inspections during its build. The HOA also told them that not only did they have to take down their 10-tall fence, but as they did not get prior approval and because it was not an approved design, the HOA also hit them with a hefty fine. Initially neighbor came after us for tattling, but we told them it wasn't us, as nothing they did affected us in any way. Our kids are early risers, so even starting before 7 didn't bother us. My husband then said he tried to warn them this would happen, but neighbor told him to fuck off and mind his own business, and he did. Landscaping had started on Black Friday, was shut down for 3 weeks while I guess they got things sorted out with the city and HOA. Their backyard is still not finished. Edit, I truly want to say, it wasn't us that called the HOA or city. We just let him be. But he pissed off a lot of neighbors. When cutting down those trees, he had chainsaws and the wood chippers going off by 6:45. And the bobcat being used by 7 a.m. 6 days a week. Other neighbors tried to ask him to put his dirt on his driveway instead of the street. He told them off to mind their own business too. And a few people went ballistic on him when their car slid a bit after the rains. We had turned the remaining dirt to mud. The school bus could also easily have complained to someone about it too, as it was a big ordeal for them. Also, there were other things he did to his front yard that we didn't warn him about either, and he got dinged for, but I made this post mostly about him trying to go against the city. Although the changes he made to the driveway also got dinged by the city. And yes, from what I heard, the tree fines were painful. Edit 2, no really, it wasn't us face with tears of joy, although not going to lie, we almost ratted them out when they took out the beautiful oak tree in their front yard, put up a 20 flag pole, and put up a Chicago Bears flag. My husband can't stand that team. But we still kept quiet, and that flagpole was taken down about a week later. It could have been the HOA or city noticing on their own, or a neighbor reporting them because the clanging it made all day and night was awful. A passenger abuses me, the bus driver? Enjoy walking 4 kilometers home, by use run thanked _bus_ driver. I'm a bus driver. Passengers have to press a stop button if they want the bus to stop at the next stop. Pressing the stop button flicks on a huge banner on the front of the bus, along with making a loud buzz. There are multiple stop buttons on the bus. The condition of buses are quite bad here, some of the stop buttons are faulty. It's usually not a big deal as passengers can see if the banner is flicked on, and if it's not, the passenger can just press another button or verbally tell me to stop. However, it just doesn't register with some passengers that there is a huge, visible, and audible banner. Unfortunately, these same passengers tend to lose their minds easily. It was 9:30 p.m. and I was driving between two large suburbs, let's call them Sunnydale and Riverdale. A passenger must have pressed the stop button but it didn't register on the banner. As I drove past the stop he yelled, "Oi ya effing dog CNT, ya missed me stop D*head." I apologized and tried to explain to him that the button must have been faulty and that I would drop him at the next stop. I told him that I could not drop him off on the side of the road because I would get in trouble from the bus company as they have GPS tracking whenever I open the bus door. The passenger just yelled, "Stop talking shit and open the door ya black C*NT." I stopped at the next stop, about 500 meters ahead, but the passenger yelled, "Just go to Riverdale mate, I ain't walking." Now, what the passenger didn't know was that since Sunnyvale was a bigger town, the last bus from Sunnyvale to Riverdale was later than the last bus from Riverdale to Sunnyvale. He would be stranded at Riverdale, 4 kilometers away from his stop. So I kept driving to Riverdale, as the passenger requested. I dropped him and the other passengers off and closed the door. I could see him checking the posted timetable on the bus stop. I put my bus into gear and pulled out. I heard him exclaim, "Hey wait," as I did so. Unfortunately, I could not have dropped him back to his stop even if I wanted to. I have a strict schedule and change route numbers after each trip. My schedule now was to fill up the bus with diesel and head back to the depot. I filled up my bus and headed back to the bus depot. As I drove back, I saw him walking on the side of the road. From 500 meters to 4,000 meters. Everyone got mad because I took charge when no one else would. Sure, I let them dig their own grave, by user brew 3017. About 14 years ago I went to work for a major petroleum company in Indianapolis. Over my 4 years there I applied myself and gained enough knowledge to be more knowledgeable than the most senior guy. Well, one day stuff hit the fan and we were looking at a potentially major spill because the packing in a pump had failed. Nobody was doing anything and I'm a take charge kind of guy, so I started barking orders. Now you have to understand this would have been an EPA nightmare, so there was no time for niceties. The other employees went and complained and I was called into the manager's office and was told about the complaints that I just barked orders and didn't ask nicely. He told me that I did the right thing and that next time if it wasn't going to be a major issue to give them enough rope to hang themselves, bet. So the next time I saw that they had the valves set up in such a way that 2 soak tanks, for making asphalt emulsion, would overflow, and while not an EPA big deal it would bring scrutiny from the health, environmental, safety, and security decision of our company. I mentioned to them that they might want to check the valve lineup because something didn't look right. Well, they told me to mind my own business. As it was time for me to go home I called the manager from my car and said, "You should probably start heading to the terminal because 2 tanks are about to overrun." I tried to tell them but they told me to mind my own business. I didn't get halfway home before a neighbor to the facility came knocking on the door saying liquid was overflowing 2 tanks. As the only first responder not involved in the incident, I had to return to the facility and supervise cleanup until the big guns from corporate came in about 3 hours later. All 3 were put on probation and then eventually fired for more screw UPS. The beauty of this was after that incident they were told to follow what I said explicitly, and never again complain that someone doesn't say please and thank you in a crisis. They all hated me until the day they left. Why? Because I was the only person to take charge when no one else would. Okay, I'll let you speak, by user Pladlock. So this happened a good like 7 to 8 years ago. I used to work on a help desk. We had recent switch a major software to a new one. They didn't want to train us on that system, so they paid for a third-party DAOC to deal with those calls. When you called, it was phone tree that basically said to press 1 for the new software or press 2 for any other issues. If you pressed 2 and had an issues for line 1, we had to transfer you. We had no training access, and the contract stipulated it as well. So no way to help you in any way. Things are different now, but that was the deal at that point. So this user calls us, I get her information and proceeds to immediately tell me that she is having an issue with this system. I try to interrupt her polite and she cuts me off and proceeds to yell into the phone, "How dare you! You do not interrupt me, that is rude, and you will let me finish." I said nothing and let her talk. She proceeds to talk for a full 5 minutes, I timed here, giving me the full rundown of her issues in excruciating detail. She finally finished. I let there be a pause where she goes hello. Both to annoy her a bit and to make sure she is actually done. I put on my AAA+++ customer service voice and ask if she is done, as I didn't want to interrupt her again. I then explained sweetly and politely, "I'm sorry, I was trying not to waste your time early when I tried to interrupt. This is the wrong line for this system, and I was trying to get you to the correct line so they can help you. I need to transfer you." Just oozing all that I was just trying to help you I could. There was no sound coming from the phone, but I could feel the red-hot rage and embarrassment coming through the phone as I transferred her to the correct line. Shelly's Seafood Restaurant, Don't Mess with the Waitress, by user Superb_Raccoon. Near my former place of work was an excellent seafood place named Shelly's. Far better than you would expect from the average strip mall outside. They made amazingly good food. The pasta jambalaya, shrimp louis, and lobster roll were particularly good. And lunch was reasonably cheap, usually $15 with tip if you stayed on the lunch menu. Unlimited bread rolls ensured you would not go hungry, and they were damn good too. One of the waitresses though, well, she could be little trying. Must have been over 70, a former smoker, and she took 2 to 3 breaths to ask you what you want to drink. And a little hard of hearing, a challenge for my soft-spoken Australian expat coworker. But she was a fixture. So you bit your tongue and you knew the chef would lay a little extra on your plate, and sometimes free dessert, Boston cream pie, house-made. Except the Karens, who complained and snigger behind her back. And went to the manger, also an owner, to ask to be reseated. Of course, let me show you to the patio. Well, Jimmy and I exchanged a look, because we know the patio is only open for dinner. 15 minutes later they stomped back in to complain that no one came to take their order, and they had to head back to the office, and what was he going to do about it? Most people take the hint, lady. Speechless, they sputtered and left. Meanwhile, our waitress wandered by with free pie and the check. "Anything else, boys?" "We're good, Shelly, thanks for the pie." "You boys be good. See you next week." And then she wandered off, still working in the restaurant she started 60+ years ago, now run by her son, the manager. At the time of the incident. P.S. Just before COVID, Shelly passed away from emphysema-related problems, 89, working in her restaurant she opened with her husband at age 19, and worked there for 70 years. Her son took over as manager, but she still showed up to work every day, working the lunch hour, sometimes early dinner if she felt good. Wife and I celebrated many events there over the years, including her telling me she was pregnant after 3 years of trying and a miscarriage. Shelly was there for more than a few lunches and dinners. My mate from Australia chipped in by her flowers for the funeral when I told him.